Okay, folks, I think we'll make a start. Okay, folks, I think we'll make a start. Thanks for joining us once again. John McGrath is my name. So this is part of the module on the MSc and project management. We have a panel discussion every week, and we've opened it up to welcome and learn also from the panel, but also the wider industry. So this is a slightly different panel to what you might be interested in. As you notice that we've given people the ability to turn on their mics and their cameras. So while we do want to hear from the panel themselves, we do recognize there's a massive amount of experience in the audience, and we do welcome you to get involved as well. So ideally, you would enter your comments via chat, and when your question comes up, we'd love you to get involved then and discuss as your question and why it's important to you. So we'll get straight down to business. In terms of the panel this week, we've Avril Dockery, who's a QA manager at Dropbox, Elenia Qureshi, who's an Agile coach and master black belt, Denise Carly DeFritis, senior engineering project manager. I'm pretending I'm pronouncing all these correctly. I hope I am. Jennifer Callan Crilly. Jennifer is an Agile coach and Scrum Master with Accenture. Ken King, who's an Agile coach working with AIG. And Lisa Martin, who's an Agile coach at BP. And Roy Champ, who's head of project management at the NTMA. So big panel, lots of experience. So in terms of maybe starting with, that I think everyone wants to hear, from our panel, we would ask you what's working and what isn't working in terms of your Agile approach at present. Would anyone on the panel like to take that question?
I suppose maybe, John, from the point of view of the NTMA, because we're relatively new to Agile, small projects that we've tried so far with a fixed scope and a fixed budget have worked very well in Agile. We've delivered within the time frame. We've delivered something that the users are happy with. Some larger projects have gone into a sort of a perpetual Agile mode. So we're just trying to get our heads a little bit around that, so that getting the end fixed, the perception of being able to continuously develop an Agile rather than actually delivering across a project structure. So they're probably the two sides of what we're doing, but it's been quite successful so far, I would say.
Okay, very good. Okay, anybody else in terms of or practices you're using?
Yeah, I'd like to just add to that. I think Agile has had an uneasy relationship with traditional project management, shall we say, right? And but what I have seen in my particular expertise is scaled Agile framework. It's a scaled Agile approach for large companies, large efforts. And what we see time and time again is that is the initial approach. You take existing projects and you Agile them. And they're usually tried to be fixed scope and fixed budget, right? But companies, within about 2 years, most companies move on from that and realize that you have to change the way you fund things, and you have to drop the word project from your lexicon, right? To your point there, Roy, it's a continuous management. It's a continuous change management. And that is another word for Agile. It is continuous change management. You're always dealing with change rather than change being the exception to your project plan.
Okay.
Do you want to move on?
Oh, sure. Yeah, jump in. Yeah. Yep.
So, like in my experience, I think that for larger companies that has like strategy plans for like the year, like I think that usually they use more like a hybrid methodology, as Roy said. So they have like a budget, a fixed budget, probably some kind of fixed scope at a high level. And I think that works very well because the change management is much better than the waterfall approach. And I have been seeing in startups that are growing, that are scaling, that they are using a lot of Kanban. So now the Kanban University, they released the Kanban maturity model. This is the one that I'm working at the moment. And it seems very easy to use. It's very close to the SAFe approach, but it seems very easier to implement than, SAFe, because you can start with what you have now. So this is a very good, new in the market that I'm very looking forward to see companies implementing.
Okay. And in terms of when you mentioned, for example, the Kanban board, which is kind of a classic Agile tool. So I think a lot of people involved in Agile, supporters, or even people who are a little bit curious on the outside, they wonder what's the difference between doing Agile and being Agile. So in terms of an Agile practice is very easy to adopt. You can start using Kanban boards overnight and it's an Agile practice. But in terms of becoming truly Agile, when we think about what Ken talked about, an organization who embraces continually changing, that's a whole different ball game. What's the difference, do you think, or what's the journey required to go from doing Agile to becoming Agile?
I think it's very cultural. So like to be agile is something that you need to change the culture of the company. It's not only, you know, adopting some tools or having like Kanban boards, things like that. So you need to change the mindset. And the Kanban method is very related to the lean transformation. So it's a kind of different way of thinking on like having, you know, continuous feedback loops and for the company have more contact with the customer. So this is more like a change of mindset of, you know, for example, a company that has a project for a year or something like that. So they don't do that much feedback loops. They are not releasing continuously. So it's mostly a mindset change.
Okay, so if we look at that, you know, getting large organizations to change is extremely difficult. So I'm thinking in terms of Jenny working in a consulting environment with very large traditional clients. If I think about Lisa working with BP, which is an extremely old traditional oil and gas company, and I think Roy working in a state agency and quite a large agency. In terms of how do you get your senior leadership to embrace continually changing? I mean, if you can do that, why are you here? Why are you not lying on the beach somewhere writing books about this? That's
okay. For me, I don't work in old style consultancy Accenture. I work in their Global Innovation Centre in the dock. So we're the global innovation hub for Accenture. So we sort of exist, we are part of Accenture and but we exist in our own bubble outside. However, Agile is something that's been taken on by the whole company. We're talking about Paul Doherty, our CTO. This is a message coming down from the top, that this is how it has to work. As well, there's a few clarifications. Agree completely with Denise that Agile is actually a mindset. People think Agile is Scrum. People think Agile is Kanban. People think Agile, it's not. They are frameworks that you can use to show progression or to plan. Agile is basically, in simple, if I quote Alistair Coburn, who's recently sort of revisiting Agile, because we're trying to get past, the bad word, negative connotations that Agile has. Oh, it's only for software. It doesn't work for anything but software. You need to continually release. So we don't do that. We're in HR, we're in marketing. It's not about that. It's about setting unified, small, achievable goals, coming together, collaborating together to set those out, delivering on those goals. So everybody makes the plan. We talk to each other, marketing, designers, everybody come together. We talk, we make a plan for 2 weeks. In the next 2 weeks, we want to have achieved this. We set explicitly what we want to have achieved. We deliver it. Then we reflect. We look at it and we go, okay, how did that go? Did we work well together? What would we change? What didn't work? How will we make it better next time? And then we improve and we go again. And that basically is Agile. So it can be applied to anything. Any organization, any structure, any department, but it is harder for perhaps less. I know there's big shifts happening in Accenture at the moment. So Agile is something we're very aware of. DevOps, there is a shift to that, but you do need organizational buy-in to make it a reality. But starting small is the key. Big bang change is going to cause havoc. And so you need to start, implement something, try it, see if it works. That works. Now what next big priority or pain point can we address? Let's implement this, test it, see if it works.
Okay,
And that's
so you guys are essentially trying to build it bottom up. You're building it bottom up, where other people have said you need to work top down to make Agile work. So that's another.
Yeah, I think you need both. I think you need both, John. And to pick up on something Jenny said there, I like to. There's a quote going around there from a bank CEO, right, who said that every organization now is a software development house, whether it realizes it or not.
true.
A bank is just a software house that just happens to have a finance license. And when you think about it, software is in everything now. Every organization needs software.
Yeah. So just
and it's part of everything we do.
Yeah.
Hi.
Yeah, Lisa, you're going to jump in, and you just in terms just to give a bit of context. So I completely agree with both the point that Jenny and Ken are making. It's more complex. It needs top down, needs bottom up. But in terms of the organizational buy-in, I think that is the real difficult piece, getting the senior leadership team. And when I spoke to Lisa, Lisa said to me, I'm not a techie, I'm not a software developer. And I said, neither am I. So you're essentially trying to win the hearts and minds of your senior leadership team in BP. Would that be the case, Lisa, do you think?
I am working with leadership teams at BP, but what I will say is I and other coaches are actually not responsible for changing the mindset of the CEO. Well, actually, I won't talk about him, but what I will talk about is the reasons why leadership teams embrace agility is because agility allows you to adapt and pivot really, really quickly to market changes. So BP is adapting really quickly and pivoting to market changes because people don't want fossil fuels anymore. People want renewable energy. So therefore, the whole market is going to change. So the organization has to completely transform. And if you're going to transform the organization, well, then you want to transform it in a way that the new organization is going to be able to pivot and adapt to other changes that are further down the line. So I think that it can be very difficult for coaches to come in and change the minds of CEOs, because if their businesses are already making money and their shareholders are being paid, why should they change? They need the reasons change. We don't transform for the sake of agility. We embrace agility for a specific reason, but the why isn't to be agile. Does that make sense?
Okay, very good. It does make sense. And just, I suppose, as I digest it here, I'm thinking to myself that actually implementing Agile is a change management initiative by its very nature. That's the complexity. Bringing Agile is change as well into it. So I just don't want to ignore our audience. We have plenty of questions starting to come in. So I'll just read them out. And understandably, sometimes people have quite a long question because they're trying to maybe get across quite a complex point. So let me go with this one. This is from Paul Gill. What kind of time frame would be needed for a large company to transfer from traditional waterfall approach in projects to Agile? My experience is that the vast majority of employees have no experience with Agile and have little attitude, little appetite to learn when you're already having success with traditional waterfall approach. So I suppose the question is, there's two questions in that, I suppose. First, I'm sure the panel are wondering if traditional waterfall is working. Agile is not a silver bullet. It may be appropriate in some type of projects, but I think in terms of the time frame, and again, that's going to be a complex. The answer in all complex questions tends to be it depends. But anyone take an attempt at that in terms of, there's a number of kind of massive topics around that. First of all, the time frame, getting buy-in with employees. And then the other issue is whether you should be using Agile or using traditional. So there's three questions or three important topics in that, I think.
So go ahead, Roy.
Yeah, so I was going to just say, from the point of view of coming from an organization that are using waterfall and Agile, you'd have to know why you would want to change. And I mean, when I saw that question coming in, I went, if you're an organization that is very successful with waterfall, there's no driver to change. And you're not facing into a scenario where you need to adapt quickly to market forces, then waterfall is going to work. So starting from a position where you don't have a driver for change is always a very difficult place to implement change itself. And I agree with you, John. Implementing Agile is a change management program much more than it is an implementation of Agile.
Could I just jump in there, if that's okay, and add to what Roy has said? I agree with a lot of what you've said, Roy. And however, what I would say is that the only certainty in life is that, you know, nothing is certain and everything changes, you know, and we've seen that with COVID. And so many organizations have had to pivot or adapt or die, you know, and we spoke about this the other day, you know, so many online retailers are doing an absolute bomb at the moment. And if we look at Primark, for example, who don't have an online offering compared to their competitors, it's a different story. So while organizations at the moment, some organizations think that, oh, we're fine, waterfall's working fine. But if something happens and it's going to take them a year of traditional change or project management to actually be able to react to that, then, I mean, what's the outcome going to be? Or is that organization still going to be around?
Yeah,
but yes, there has to be a why.
Waterfall was working quite well for Microsoft.
Yeah, it was. Yeah.
But they
No,
had to change,
see-
and they're on their 7th attempt to go agile. That's how serious they know they have to
Yeah.
keep up with Amazon and co. You know what I mean?
You see, the thing is, I'm hearing a lot of, transformation, the time, restraints or time frame. The whole point is becoming agile is that the word itself means, ability to adapt quickly, at personal level, at business level, at any level. That's the basic meaning of it. And if you see all of us, in this, whoever is participating, we are here, we are creatures of habit. How easy it for us to change, so it's not that easy. Let's be honest, we like to, get up, do all of us have our routines, all of that. If something get disrupted, how do we feel? So the whole point is it's not about transformation as well. When you say transformation or change, people think, oh, somebody is going to come in and change us. The whole point is transformation needs to be looked at from a different lens. It needs to be looked after building the capability. How can we adapt quickly? What do we need to do to be able to pivot? It's harder at a personal level. So let alone when an organization is, which is responsible for generating revenue, they need to pay their employees. All of that needs to be taken into consideration. So the leadership will be under pressure to ensure that, they are delivering based on the fact the money needs to come in. So when they're spending the money, they need to be able to understand. So there are a couple of things that we need to look at it. First thing is, to your question, John, being agile, being agile is it has to start from self. I cannot be, wear the mask of an agile coach and go, oh, I want you to be agile. That's not the way. It's about understanding what's the need there, then bringing in, putting yourself aside and listening to people. Okay, what is the reason for bringing in a transformation, and how can you do it in a best way? Enabling people. People don't have training. I'm hearing, the time frame. The whole time about agility is you take, smaller step and you adapt accordingly. If you're going to put a time frame, then you're better off doing waterfall. Agility is, seeing, okay, what did I do in 2 weeks? To, Jenny's point, how can I improve this week? After 2 weeks, what can I do differently? Small steps. So,
Okay.
excuse me.
Yeah. So
I think to your point there too, the fact of the matter is that lots of studies now show, and I think most industries, most industry leaders would agree that the best way to produce good software is agile. PMI would have traditionally told us that most up to 75% of software projects fail using traditional management, whereas we don't see that. We see it the opposite way around with agile.
Yeah, so
but it's a different measure of progress and success.
Starting. So there's loads of questions, guys. So I'm going to have to just move it along. So I think that the points are being made that it's a mindset, but it's also a behavior as well in that, as well as the change management. So in terms of, if you can give a short answer to this, Ronan Canning from AIB, he's asked the question, how do people change the mindset? So what I would ask any of the panel, literally in one sentence, tell us a story, tell us something solid and how you kind of won the willingness to change in an organization. Give us the seed that we can plant. Anyone tell us how you get buy-in for that change?
Listen to people.
You have to
listen to people and lead by example.
Okay, listen and lead by example. Anybody else?
I think that like the biggest change that I think that it is that usually when you talk about waterfall and the traditional methodology, they were talking about measuring scope, time, and then budgeting. And in Agile, we are more focused on the objectives and key results. So you're thinking about the outcomes and not exactly about budgeting and time and scope, because you can deliver a project in the budget and in the scope and in the time and not having any outcome. So when you think about Agile or Lean, you're mostly thinking about the outcomes on how much money you're gonna earn with that. So
Yeah,
that's different on the mindset.
Okay, sure. Jump in, Roy. Go for it.
Yeah, no, I was just going to say that there are a couple of the things, and I'm afraid it's more than a one-word answer, but you need that champion, you need that success story. That's the first thing, and we tried a couple of times before we got a success story. But I suppose the big change in the mindset that I've seen is, I mean, if you're looking at a waterfall approach, you're getting people invested in the question, and with Agile, we'd be getting people invested in the answer.
Okay, interesting insight. Okay, so just I don't ignore any of the chat. So I think Helen has made the valuable, and it sounds like it could work on a T-shirt someday, that there's no more IT projects. All projects are IT now. So I think it's highlighting an earlier.
Yeah, that's what we're saying, isn't it? Software is in everything. It is your business.
Yeah, well, I think that's maybe certainly elevated IT as a strategic competency within organizations, and the last 12 months has certainly shown that through that investment in years before, which sometimes it's typically where agility starts is in your IT function within an organization and grows from there. So we'll keep going. Loads and loads of questions, guys, coming in. So I'm going to take this question here from Ruth. I think if that's Ruth from Sligo, I think, is it? So you can jump in if I'm not asking the question right, Ruth. How do you get executives to move from a fixed mindset to a growth agile mindset? We had some of those comments. Anyone add anything in there quickly for Ruth?
I'd probably. Sorry, was someone else going to go?
Go ahead.
Jump in, Lisa. Sorry, go ahead.
I was going to say it's. I think with leadership teams, the word team probably isn't always the right term to use for people who are at the very, very top level of a complex organization, because to get to that level, people, generally speaking, need to have certain personality traits. Okay. And I think that individual coaching of people on the team works best before you start building the team. And the first question, probably the most important question that you can ask those people, it's I use all the time, it's what's in it for me, as in what's in it for them. So you find out what it is that's most important to them, and then you work with them on that particular outcome. So it's not a one size fits all. You find out what it is that's most important for that one person. You work with the individuals on the board, and then you bring them all together once you've done that. But it's not a simple
that
question.
Point, to add to Lisa's point, is that if you have a choice among the leaders, choose the one that who is easier to approach.
Yeah.
Because what happens is leading by example. If you have somebody, and a lot of the time at that level there is a competition, and when they want to compete with each other, when they see the one being successful, and you have those success stories, smaller one, the other one will follow. And again, if you see, there are leaders at different level of their life, their career as well. So somebody wants to achieve a certain way, somebody has reached a certain thing. So you have to understand their personality as well and approach them. Raising awareness is, understanding change management is very important. And approaching leaders is through the understanding, raising their awareness as well. And going for the, choosing your change agents, or your influencers, very, very important.
Okay, great. We'll keep going. The questions are flying. I did say to you tonight that there'll be loads of questions in the Agile, so I got to move it along a little bit now. So Anwesha's question here is this is a die-hard Agile question, how to handle the challenges such as stabilizing the velocity, team members, conflicts, sticking to time boxing in Agile projects, specifically in cases of the Scrum approach. Sometimes it becomes difficult or complicated.
I would say
that will take a 2-day course.
Well, yeah, don't put someone who took a 2-day course in charge of this. Get somebody who actually has Agile experience and is an experienced Scrum Master and who likes people, because it's actually very important.
Yeah.
You have to motivate these people. You have to get people communicating properly. You have to, you know, get people to realize, you know, try and build that rapport, build that trust within your team. And that takes a lot of work from an Agile coach. When you have a team that are comfortable and trust each other, they'll raise issues, or they will have good, really healthy debates on problems, but you won't have this conflicts and falling out. And people then feel like they, you know, in a true Agile environment, they own this. This is their product. This is their goal. And they work together to deliver it. So my biggest advice to tackle all of that is get somebody who actually loves Agile, knows Agile, and loves people to sort this problem out for you.
And I think the key is long-lived, self-managed teams. You know,
Yeah.
This idea of hiring teams just for a project demonstrably doesn't work. Yeah. They need to stay together for a couple of years. They need long-lived, sticky teams is what we're looking for.
Yeah. One thing, what I would... Go ahead, Roy.
Sorry. Go ahead. You first.
So one thing what I would say is, you know, if you're doing the Scrum values. So what I do is personally, what I did was, which was my learning when I started off as Scrum Master and struggling to get that buy-in, was you need to put the team first. If you see, you have product owner, you have yourself as a Scrum Master, and then you have a team. So you need to learn to put the team first, and you need to get their trust. One thing what I've seen is the understanding the Scrum values and putting them and really, really putting them in practice. So if you see, and this is where you have to enable those to be able to practice those values, like, you know, Scrum values of courage, commitment, focus, you know, and respect and openness.
Yeah.
So if you understand, you know, there are 2 research papers which you can look up anywhere. There was a Scrum by without values, and in the last edition of Scrum Guide, you know, Ken did introduce the Scrum values as well, because that was something talked about for the longest time. You know, and they had to bring those values in, which were initially discussed in 1995. So, you know, again, understanding the values, what does that mean? But again, if you see, do you have the courage to say what needs to be said, or you're sulking in the background? Are you really committed to that work? So again, when you show that as a Scrum Master, again, leading by example, yes, I'm committed to the team. You know, I have the courage enough to be able to call out the behavior. So when you start doing that, people will literally follow you. You know, and ensuring that when you gain their trust, you keep their trust. You know, one thing what I do is when somebody gives me feedback, I never share the name of the person who has given me the feedback. You know, and at the same time, I've enabled them. You know, I have taught them how to give feedback as well, because it's about feedback, not only giving feedback, but receiving feedback as well. I can put the question out there. How many of us are comfortable to receive feedback? How many of us have ever asked for feedback? You know, so again, this is a cultural thing. Again, once you start developing it in yourself and people see that, like I start a conversation with my manager, what's the feedback for me? And they will be taken by, you know, surprise. Oh, you know, they're not prepared. Somebody's asking for the feedback. So this is a culture that you need to develop, and it has to start with yourself.
Yeah, I think you're right, Alina. That team-based culture is at the heart of Agile, of course, right? And you know, building that trust, as we said, and you need, that's what we're saying. You need teams to be together for a long time to be able to build that trust and respect for each other in order to work in a truly open and frank and courageous way.
I see a comment coming in the chat. That's pretty much what I was going to say. I mean, I've been looking at project management and teams for a very long time now, and that discussion hasn't changed in 25 years.
No, it's the same.
A team is a team. I think that some of the mistake that can be made is thinking that because we're doing Agile, everyone is going to get together as a team.
Yeah.
You still have to build a team.
Yeah.
You know, if you to that point, Roy and Ken, I would like, you know, one thing what I experimented recently was, you know, because in Agile, well, you cannot have long-term teams as well because of the nature of the change coming in, you know, people. One thing what I agreed with my leadership was, again, it made it easier for me because I report into C-suite, you know, and that was my ask from very start, that if you're hiring me, I have to be placed in a certain place. Otherwise, there's no point in hiring me as well, you know. So what I did was we started with a very core team, you know, which bounded together. And when we started to come, you know, build other teams, we chose the same team members who had worked together and, you know, disperse them into the other teams, because then they bring the culture with them. So
I
something,
agree, yeah.
something that you need to look into that is that when you are building the teams, start with the core team. And if you see there is an opportunity to place them in different teams, that's the approach to take. And they because if you see they were together, they go through the whole phase of the norming, forming, storming, and the grieving as well. But what happens is the relationships are established so strongly, even when they disperse, they gravitate towards each other, and that brings that culture into it. So currently what we have done is we started with one core team, and now we have spread into 4 or 5 teams, and all of the team members were from my original team as well, and then there's scrum masters reporting to me. So what I do is I can have a buy-in from the other team members as well, because I know I have a little bit of influence there and the other teams as well.
I don't think that's only true of agile teams. It's true of any project team or any group of people that work together.
Yeah,
exclusive to agile.
I hear you, but I would say, Avril, that it's the emphasis on team. It's much more stronger in agile.
Mm-hmm.
It's hard to explain the nature of it without experiencing it. The team members need to be much more collaborative with each other, and help each other much more than they would in a traditional setting, where I'm given a task and I'm going to do the task. It's in agile. If we take the team approach to its full implications, teams work on one thing together at a time. We talk about pair programming and mob programming even these days, where the whole team will sit around one desktop and work together on it. Very hard to do now in the COVID situation, but that's the ultimate implication of where we're going. And some teams can be, some people can be very uncomfortable with that level of close collaboration and relying on each other.
I think that's down to the coach really, or the scrum master, because I think that it's great for trust. Pair programming, swarming, all of that. It can be a brave thing for a new coach or a new scrum master to do, but it can really help build trust and psychological safety. And once you've got that, then as Jenny was saying earlier, like people can collaborate and really achieve some fantastic outcomes. And it doesn't, I would agree with you slightly. I don't think it takes years to actually build high performing teams. I think you can do it quite quickly, but you need to have a dedicated coach or scrum master. Sorry?
You can get lucky.
No. I think with the right skills in there, like if you've got like the right
skills. Ken, to that point,
I'm going to come back to it, guys, because we've got to move on. There's loads of questions.
Sorry.
It's great.
Yeah, we're getting carried away on this one.
Insight is it's more on the softer side. So we haven't heard anyone. It seems a lot of it is behaviors and cultures, which I think is very good. In a small defense of the traditional project management, they do value those things as well. And we have moved beyond time, scope, and cost. And we now talk about benefits realization, which in fairness, I do think is a softening of traditional PM coming and embracing agile, which is and it's going to become a hybrid, I think, nowadays.
I completely agree with that, because when you think about certifications, for example, like if you think about like an agile, like basic certification and a traditional one like PMP, it covers a lot of different capabilities, and you have, stakeholder management and all those things that you can improve for, communication, and it brings a lot of tools that you can use in Agile as well. It's not something that you can't use anymore. You need to forget everything that you learn.
Yeah, I think so. Okay, new question, guys. This is from B. Sant, who I think, if it is who it is in somewhere near San Francisco. If that's the case, you can give me a thumbs up or say hello. Now, the question here, the one big challenge I faced in the companies I took Agile was driving the shift from thinking of project management success as on time, on budget, to delivering minimally viable and being ready to adopt scope and release plans. So this is kind of the core. That's sort of the background. To admit that you don't know everything about the product or solution. So what strategies have worked with the panel in driving this cultural shift? So I do think you've led to a lot of it in terms of engagement, in terms of your own personal trait, the importance of team is coming in. Any other item we would drop in, a key word?
Cross-functional teams. Cross-functional team.
Okay. Trust is obviously part of it.
I'm sorry.
Early visibility of the product. That's the real key in an agile approach.
Yeah.
Demonstrating very early in the life cycle where you're going with the whole thing.
Lisa's itching to get in there. Go on.
Sorry, I just wanted to roll back a little bit to the person who asked the question, because I think that there may be a clue in the way the question was asked, because we shouldn't be driving any change. It should be pull. So if you're driving to embrace agility, it's not going to work. It has to be more of a pull, more of an encouragement. If you push too hard, we'll push back at every level. So I think maybe sometimes we have to think about our approach as coaches or change agents, because we shouldn't be driving anything. We should be pulling it. If that makes sense.
Yeah, sure. Okay. Next question is sent to me privately, so I will never call out the person's name. So they've asked the question here, so I might be caught in the hop here. God knows what's coming next, but we'll read it anyway. John, we are involved in a number of agile transformations at the moment. We see a lot of what each of the panel have spoken about. Times are changing. Are you worried for the future of project management in its traditional sense? Unfortunately, I don't worry about anything. Sleep well every night. When we talk about to move to not just agile methodologies like SAFe, but business agility, will there be much traditional project management 10 years, or will we all be Scrum Masters and product owners? God forbid. So,
when you look at the PMI itself has recently teamed up with Disciplined Agile Delivery, and the latest version of the PMBOK has all about been introducing the agile methodologies, vocabulary, etc. There's a whole separate guide on agile adaptive methodologies. So I think PMI has always had that approach of trying to bring in every tool and technique. So it's natural for it to try and bring the agile tools and techniques under its umbrella. So I think we will continue to see that traditional project management will morph more towards the agile mindset. I think it'll have to. So I was intrigued by the report that story that the new director of the PMI was asked, does he think they'll have to change the name of it?
Oh, right.
From Project Management Institute to something else, because and he said no, but I'm wondering if eventually he will have to consider it.
Yeah, well, it's interesting just to kind of that sort of that battle between traditional and agile. I actually don't think it's there. We had this discussion with the panel when we were trying to get to know each other, and we were sort of saying that people on the agile side of the fence can embrace the need for traditional ways of planning, and people on traditional planning can embrace the need to embrace change, uncertainty, etc. So I do think on both sides of the fence we're moving to a hybrid, and I think that's more a maturity on both sides of the divide as such in terms of making progress. We'll keep going. Next question. So this is from I can't see the first name. It just says from McNamara. So does the panel see Agile as being industry specific? That's a great question. Now, does the panel see Agile as being industry specific? Works well for software companies, but not so well for regulatory industries, banking and pharma, for example. Now, it is certainly being adopted in financial services and in pharma, especially medical devices, I think.
There's actual massive research at the moment. So Lero, who I would have been a part of, so the Irish Software Research Centre, they have had an ongoing research project based in DKIT in Dundalk here on medical, basically agile principles and practices for the medical device software development domain, because of the amount of regulatory hoops that have to be done, and you have to do your planning up front to pass the regulations to try and actually then go and implement the product. And there are so many phase gates, but there's a realization there, even from the likes of the FDA, that some of their regulatory processes are going to have to change. Yeah. So there's a big body of work actually going on under the umbrella of SFI at the moment around that, and how we work with the regulatory bodies to best take all of the necessary. Obviously, you're talking about safety critical systems, so you have to make all the necessary checks, but there's no way that Agile should, skip any of those steps, because you're doing all of those processes, your safety, your quality checks in smaller, tighter cycles. So there's a lot of investigation as to how that can work at the moment.
Yeah, and I think too, if you on a very simple level, we think about the nature. The point was made that banks are now IT companies. The point was made about everything being IT, but that's very much the case. I mean, pharma, medical device, they have apps, they have digestible trackers, etc. So the pharma and medical device is as much a technology company now as any bank or software company.
There's always a great flow of ideas backwards and forwards here. Like we all know Agile came about in the 90s originally as a software development methodology, but then it borrowed heavily from Lean, which is from manufacturing, from Toyota Production System, and it's flowing back again. Agile is flowing back into other industries. There is this kind of tidal effect going on of these ideas spreading across industries and learning from each other.
And also, I mean, NASA have been sorry, Lena, do you want to go?
No. I was going to share the same example.
Oh, were you?
So go ahead. Go ahead.
NASA, they've been building spacecraft using Agile methodologies for years now. I think the answer is already out there. Almost every bank is at some stage of their Agile journey. Some are further ahead than others.
But if you see, again, NASA was, Lisa, to your example, why they chose this after the accident that happened.
Yeah, exactly.
If you see, that made them realize that, it was a small error that cost so many lives.
Yeah.
And again, realization, and they're willing to change because it was not something small.
Yeah, we're seeing the same with Boeing. The problems they had with that MAX aircraft were software.
So I think that
the software problems that brought the two planes down. Sorry, Denise.
Just a question: would you get up in a plane that was designed to be the minimum viable product?
It's a good question.
Well, it needs to be tested.
Or use a parachute.
that was the Wright brothers version.
I think a lot of industries are more agile than they realize. So a lot of the properties and behaviors of agile are just behaviors of high functioning teams. Without putting a label of agile on it, a high functioning team has a lot of these properties and the ways of working. So I think a lot of organizations or industries don't see themselves as agile, but actually are in a high functioning team.
Yeah,
I think that
the point was made there just in the chat and by Ronan, and it is the case, but so can a project team or any team that doesn't claim to be agile. So it's not just agile PM or it's across any. There can be high performing teams in any. There's more to that than the agility, I think, too.
Well, could I just jump in there again and just say, I think where agile teams can deliver faster and where they can perform better is because there isn't top-down management. It's servant leadership, and the people doing the work are actually making the decisions. And that middle layer of management or that top layer of management can slow down teams' performance in traditional project management. And I think it's taking that layer out and trusting the people doing the work, which makes all the difference, which is agile teams, really.
Okay, very good. Good insight. Well, keep going, guys. Loads of questions. So Jason's question here: the team equals puzzle. You have to put the correct pieces together for the puzzle to come together. Understanding people's key strengths and weaknesses will help. The lead does need to be a communicative people person who understands the problem and drives the why for people and drives the process to work. So in fairness, I think that's what the panel have been saying.
Very true.
Yeah.
Again, if you see, it's not that you can pick and choose people. The whole point is, you know what you're building. I've said that, cross-functional team. What you need to teach people is it's okay to accept the other person for who they are. Again, acceptance, respect, having the respect, because I can come and look, I'm doing this, you have to change. Again, it's not about the other person, it's about you understanding, okay, what do I add value, and to be able to listen to the other person and value the other person as well. Because if you see, all of us have a different backgrounds, different experiences. The thing is, again, basic to the values, respect, having the respect, understanding that, again, if your team leader is, struggling to be able to, they have been put in that position to be able to communicate that this is what we are lacking, this is what we would like from you again. So having those values, yes, puzzle pieces, people will be put together. And earlier the point was made, a lot of the teams might not have the word attached agile to them. The other thing is, once you know that there is a shared goal that all of us are working towards, that helps bring the teams together as well. Again, for providing the clarity, clarity is very, very important on what are we doing, and then given the autonomy to the teams to how to do it, that's a game changer.
Okay, we're going to keep going, guys. I'm 11 minutes behind my question, so I got to be agile. You'll have to forgive me. So in terms of my next question, this is moving off topic and to something different, which I think is very relevant with so many agile coaches on the panel. So question here from John McLaughlin. As a project consultant, I see companies spending large amounts on agile training, and yet they are unable to put it into practice after the coaching ends. Do we need to rethink how we train companies to go agile? And in fairness, I think that's a broader question about anything with project management. Agile seems to be obsessed with certification as opposed to competency checking. That would be an observation I might make myself, but you guys are the experts in agile coaching. What do you think?
I think you have to start with the education. There has to be that initial education to give people the tool sets and so on. But then I think most of our coaches agree you need to be there for the duration.
Yeah.
To coach people through, because they have continuous problems and continuous issues with the approach.
So one thing I would like to add here is, to Ken's point, is that a lot of the time people do these 2 days training and they think they become experts. One thing we always have to remember is there are learning stages by default, the way human brain works. We have to understand that. After learning, it's knowledge, then understanding, developing, going through that stages. There are 5 stages that you have to go to become an expert. And even after that, it's a continuous, continuous improvement. That's where you think, that's where you need to understand when you're getting a training, do you have people there, to support them, to, they can shadow, they can see how other people are doing it, mentoring them, coaching them. You cannot have a 2-person, 2-day training and send them, okay, you become a Scrum Master, go and do that. There is such a skill set, vast skill set that you need to acquire to get to a place, where you can support people. It just doesn't happen overnight. And that's the reason, people do get training and then it's expected, oh, you become the, experts. That doesn't work like that.
No. Yeah, Could I add to what Alina just said? I really agree with everything Alina and Ken has said so far, but I'd also like to add that I think when organizations want to go on an agile transformation, sometimes what they do is they train their people in-house and they give them certifications in a couple of days, and maybe someone who was a PM for 10 years suddenly find themselves being a Scrum Master after a 2-day training course. And with the best will in the world, they don't have the right training or experience to be able to do that yet. So I think it needs to be a combination of bringing consultants in. But when I say consultants, I mean bring people in from other organizations to support the people within the organization going through those changes.
You need to buy in some of the expertise.
Or hire in some people to continue.
Hire people in to actually help with that change, because those people who you bring in, those outsiders, they're outside of the system as well. So they don't necessarily have to worry about their career or annoying somebody a bit further up off the chain. They can remain outside of that and really, really help the organization embrace change. But they shouldn't be there forever. Maybe a contractor there for a year or 2 years. But they have to bring everybody up within the organization with them so that when they go, they are no longer needed and that organization can carry on the journey.
To that, sometimes you have to move people on.
Yeah, you do.
You can't do it. Unfortunately,
that's the reality.
Reality of it.
Okay, so the general just, I think, in terms of John's question, is that the training is the beginning of the process, not the process.
Yes.
Be followed by external coaching and consultancy, and perhaps
a light switch you can switch on and say you're agile.
Practice.
You get the badge after 2 days.
I also think that sometimes the high managers, they don't buy the agile, like they don't believe in the mindset, so they just pay for like a consulting company to come to the company and do the rollout of the agile method, and then after I don't know, 3 months, they go away, and then they don't know how to keep doing it. And that's when it comes like what Lisa was saying, of bringing someone from the outside, like start to hiring people that have some expertise in the market, and then, you know, roll out it better and continuous improve.
Yeah.
You can also approach it from a different way and bring it in slowly. So
Yeah.
if you're shocking everybody in the organization and just going, you're doing Agile now and that's it, it's very difficult for people. Bring them on a journey and improve slowly. Make small changes to work towards the actual goal. But organizations need to give teams a chance to bed in and find their feet.
And I think so. One thing very important, I think so, I haven't heard it so far, is the fact we need to take into consideration the word fear. You know, all of us have the fear of change. You know, all of us, you know, it's livelihood. And as soon as that, a lot of the time when companies announce these things, you know, suddenly the changes it brings a lot of fear to the people, you know, who are traditional in certain way or certain way, you know, taking them into confidence, you know, and driving out the fear. You know, again, a lot of these things have been, you know, taken in by the lean, a lot of that. One thing people do forget is the success for the Toyota production system was not the processes. It was the one thing that if anybody on the, you know, it's still the case, if somebody on the, you know, the production line raises their hand and asks the production to be stopped, people stop. So it's listening to the people, you know, who are doing the work done. If somebody is raising an concern, just don't take that, oh, you know, this is person, he just keeps on objecting to things. Let's ignore him and let's move on. So something we have to learn is, and promote it within the communities and the companies that we are working for, is the fact, listen to the people who are getting the job done.
Yeah,
you know,
we're working with human beings, and people have feelings, and people are worried about their jobs. They've got kids, they've got a mortgage. You know, where do I fit into this new structure, into this new way of working? It's like, and we shouldn't forget that as coaches, and leaders shouldn't forget that either. You know, it's about respect, again, one of the Scrum values. So
you know, very, very important. Like, you know, people are people.
I'm just going to keep going. Just sorry now, I just have to keep on track of the question. So great insights. Just want to look at all the questions. So just going to take this one here. It's a new question from Helen. So as a traditional PM, I can carry. So we're very, very pleased to have you here, Helen, as a traditional PM. It's nice to know there's a few of you on the call. So I can carry 5 or 6 projects running with traditional governance. So governance hasn't been mentioned yet from the, I suppose, project from PMO perspective. I find with the Agile project approach, they are consuming a much more higher proportion of my time. Does the panel have any comments on this from a PM? So I suppose from a traditional PM perspective, as Helen is asking from. So just before you jump in, certainly for all the reasons of people engagement, culture, we accept that takes a huge amount more time. But in terms of to come back to the kind of nuts and bolts of Helen's question, she can juggle 5 to 6 traditional projects as an experienced PM, but the Agile, let's say she can only do half of that. Why do you think that is? Is it the complexity of the Agile projects? Is it the people? What's the issue?
It's that traditional project managers. Now, like I say, I'm from Accenture. I work in the R&D hub, but we still do have people who are traditional project managers in other parts of Accenture that have come in and joined us. So we now work in Agile, but you will find that traditional PMs come in and they struggle to trust Agile and to go with Agile, as well as that there's a place for them and I work with them. So on a project, there's a traditional project manager and there's an Agile coach. So what I would say is more than likely Helen is now trying to be sort of a project manager and an Agile coach, and they're conflict of interests. They're 2 completely separate roles. The way I like to describe it is, and the way it works really well, and this is probably why you're slowed up, Helen, because you're trying to do everything. I see a traditional project management role where it has to happen within an organization, and an Agile coach being like a successful premiership team. So like you're talking about a premiership football team. You have a manager who deals with, you know, all the buying and the finances and the publicity and everything else. And then you have a head coach who actually works directly with the players on their performance, on, you know, on how they work together, on tactics, on solving problems. And it's the combination of the two, your manager and your head coach, that basically make projects simpler. And I would say that you're probably trying to do two roles now, two conflicting roles, and it's now just become a agile project management umbrella, and it doesn't work because they're two completely separate roles.
Yeah,
a good project manager will not necessarily make a good scrum master, and vice versa. They're very different roles. Okay. Yeah.
Yeah, I would imagine if you had a head of finance on the call listening to this, you're talking about doubling my overhead in project management. Like, project managers do that all the time. They deal with the people issues, they deal with coaching, etc. So,
yeah, but a lot of what a project manager does a lot of the time is looking after finances. A scrum master will never touch
project
budgeting.
managers that isn't that they solve problems. I think a lot of PMs would.
Yeah, but that, look, we touched on it briefly earlier on, and it's too big a topic for this call. But the way you fund agile teams and trains is very different from the way you fund a project. Okay, so, and I can't really go into it much more than that, but you know, the whole cost accounting and tracking every hour of every day, that goes out the window with agile. It's done in a much more holistic and different way.
Funding a team.
I'm not too sure. Like, I don't know if Helen wants to jump in here to see if that answered the question. But I would say to you that in a lot of projects, the obsession with counting every hour efficiency in traditional PM is gone as well. That we are focusing on delivering benefits, and certainly we're milestone focused in having it. But the micromanagement of hours, I think, is a 20-year-old traditional concept of project management. So I do think, you know,
different organizations, like a lot of organizations will have outsourced a lot of work, and therefore the tracking everything is much more important to them. But yeah, it's a too big a topic perhaps to address now. We could go down a rabbit hole on it, John.
Yeah. Okay, so you have to have the official Agile tattoo to get the full answer. That's okay. We can live with that.
I'll just jump in about the
Agile. Yeah, go for it, Helen. It's like
just to jump in and answer the question. I don't know. I feel, am I Roy Keane or am I Jose Mourinho or who?
I think, sorry, your mic is very bad, Helen. I think it was probably made in an agile approach. I'm not sure what.
Yeah, I think that the funding is that's a really, really interesting point. And the Agile project I'm running to try to keep a parameters on it.
The audio is very bad, Helen. If you pop it in the chat, I'll throw back. So we'll move on, guys, just to keep the questions going. You wouldn't answer that one properly. That's my response.
Well, I was conscious of coming to the end of the time. You know, it's like yeah. Go ahead, John.
Let's keep going, guys. So the next question: can someone explain if product-centric delivery is required for Agile Scrum? We had this discussion about the importance of product as opposed to project in our earlier discussions. Anyone jump in?
Yeah, we often talk. That's one of the hot topics in Agile at the moment. There's a guy called Mick Kirsten who has written a book called Project to Product, and wants us to focus on that, because that is a lot of where Agile is going. Instead of focusing on projects, focus on the product you're trying to deliver and the whole life cycle of it instead. It's a different style and approach to producing and satisfying your customers.
I've also applied it in a research project, which doesn't deliver a product as such. So I'm not entirely sure I'd agree with that, but yes, there are uses. It is much easier to plan and create a vision when you have a product to focus on defining features. It also is very helpful in research, so you can actually break it down into fine increments to be delivered, research targets.
Sure.
I think anything that's delivered can be considered a product. Yeah, like I've worked in like operational risk areas, and they might be producing reports, but that's a product and they have a customer.
That's what I mean by product too. You know, it's that broader term of product.
Like somebody's going to use that, and there's an end customer.
We have a lot of business teams who are introducing business process change in an agile way.
Yeah,
I think have to be a software engineering product.
Yeah. There's probably definition of the term of product required, because Prince 2 actually talks about delivering products as well. So probably there is a clarity around that.
I think that usually is related to the product life cycle and the project life cycle. So usually a project is delivering a product, but then it's a piece of the product life cycle. So this is what the traditional method intended. So it's like a temporary effort to deliver a product, and then they keep doing it and improving it. That's part of the product life cycle. So the problem is that with the project that we were using to do like before, and now this new concept is to having a connection between the two things. So sometimes you have more people into the project to deliver like a massive project, and then you have less people to continue with the rest of the product life cycle. So I think that it was badly managed before, and now they are thinking on the overall.
Probably going towards the DevOps concept there, which came along around 2010, and as a secondary movement in the whole agile approach to things, because projects tend to focus on the development of something rather than the ongoing operation of it.
Yeah, exactly.
Whereas agile is about the whole.
And you're delivering earlier, right?
Yeah.
So again, if you see, there is an initial cost, to all of this, to Helen's point, but the thing is, once the teams, once the things come together, and there is it helps increase the speed as well, and the cost gets to start, because the thing is, a lot of the time the delivery period starts to get shorter because people are comfortable, people know what needs to be done. So, once the minimum viable product, and then once they are aligned with the customer in terms of what needs to be delivery, what customer wants, it's become quicker.
Okay,
it becomes quicker.
Your panel, some of the panel would not take that view of it's quicker or more efficient. So just a comment here from Norbert, who's based stateside. Hello, Norbert. How are you? So in terms of the point that Norbert makes here, which is in direct contradiction to that, Helen's comment is an important one. Not only has Agile a higher overhead on the PM, but also on the participants. And I suppose by that meaning the organization as well. They tend, so I mean people, I assume it means people in the organization tend to lose interest when the overhead gets too large. They feel they have to constantly report, and it's a big issue. So in terms of over-reporting, that it's not as efficient. So I mean, we're here to look at it from all angles. So
I might jump.
Just 1 second. I want to give any context to that, Norbert, because I think a good bit of debate is good. We've given the Agilists a soft run so far, so we'll certainly take any debate if you want to jump in, or we'll take that.
Well, I would say that there is going to be an increase in overhead if all of the pre-existing roles in an organization are still going to exist, and then you're going to also create Scrum Masters and Agile coaches, and so you've effectively got two different ways of working trying to come together and loads of roles. So yes, the overhead will actually increase. And in a truly agile organization, is there still a PMO? Are there still project and program managers? So there will be an increase in the overhead until whatever that new flatter structure is going to be, because you shouldn't have all of these roles existing at the same time for a long period of time.
It's those organizations who say they've implemented Agile, they use all the buzzwords, but they still do Scrum Fall effectively, and they have all of, so no, it does work if you implement it correctly. If you try and shove it in and say, oh, look, we'll say we do sprints that last for 6 months. Sure, we're in a sprint. I've heard that. Like it's these companies who say they're agile, but really they're not. They just use the buzzwords and smile. And that's when you get this.
Yeah, like we haven't touched on the fact too that we touched on the fact that this Agile is not just about a different way of managing projects. It's a whole company transformation, really, and it also has that on the technical side too. If you do just implement sprints and nice Agile teams, but don't address your infrastructure and your DevOps pipeline and automate as much as you can, you won't get the overall the real benefits of Agile, and that is expensive. Introducing that technological that the technology change is required as well.
If you see, these are frameworks. It's just like they have their roles and responsibilities and then boundaries around them, which is very, very important. A lot of the time, what I see is people think that, okay, this is going to be this, or team has to be big. If you see, there are just like looking at a loft, having a framework. These are the boundaries that you work within. Within that, you can have your own processes, whatever you can. The team size has to be, a certain way. You cannot have a Scrum team which is more than 9 team members. It's just you're introducing the overhead by the, in terms of communication. Communication among 2 people is different than communication among 3 people, and ensuring that how do they, they bound. Then having clarity on what and how, again, product owners are responsible for what they need, and how should be responsibility of the team. And then they have something very important, what we forget is the stakeholders, and in terms of the reporting, if your project is, whatever tool you're using, if it's not telling you what you're delivering in 2 weeks, then, and you need to do reporting on top of it, there is something fundamentally wrong then, that I would see as a trust issue. When somebody is coming and telling me, this is what I've done between yesterday and this is what I'm planning to do, and are we, delivering, still adhering to our sprint goal that we are going to deliver? Because if you see, if you're not delivering to your sprint goal, the whole point is you just stop the sprint there and then. There is no point in continuing. So I think so there has to be an understanding of what reporting means, either reporting is status of the project, or, okay, something that's working.
Okay, so good insights. Let's move it along. There's questions coming in onto my phone as well. My goodness. So let me try and juggle. So next, I'll deal with the question in the chat first. So from James O'Mara, effectiveness or value add of a PMO within an organization. Is a PMO something an organization should consider? So I think that question is around, in terms of the discussion of whether the PMO will still be relevant. So I think it will. The nature of Agile, you've mentioned small teams. You may have Agile teams operating, but they do have to feed up. And we all know how difficult it is, even in an IT company, if you're trying to deal with an executive who are interested in sales and when will product get to market and when can they increase the license fee. Typically, the PMO is acting as that bridge between strategy and the people developing the product. So I think the PMO, if anything, has a very important role, especially in large organizations.
It needs to be an agile PMO, though.
Sorry?
It needs to be an agile PMO, though.
I think that is
have a strong product management. Have a really strong product management.
Yeah,
I think from an NTMA perspective, we've seen the benefits over the last year of developing our PMO function, whether it's in agile projects or waterfall projects. They're adding value to the projects by making sure the resources are available, by knowing what we are capable of doing as an organization, by supporting the project managers and the agile teams and what they need to do, and putting the frameworks in place to let the work happen. So I think PMO will grow rather than decrease in an agile framework, I have to say.
Well, I think the nature of it will change, Roy.
Oh, it will change. Yeah. But then everything changes.
I've seen it change. Yeah, I think in the transition period, yes, I think, I know some very good agile PMOs, but I also know that they're reskilling at the moment because they see that their role is not going to exist in 5 years' time.
I think so. PMO role will need to sit in any other agile organization, because not they only help the agile coaches, they help the scrum masters as well. To the point resourcing, it takes away a lot of worry from the scrum master, the agile coaches, that they can deal with the leadership and provide them the status updates, based on what's being delivered. As far as they are aligned. And recently, I'm working with the PMO, and I have to say I'm enjoying that. I understand his perspective, but at the same time, him understanding, my perspective and working with each other and collaborating, and I think so both of the roles are evolving as, the industry is becoming mature, and people are getting to see the value in Agile. I think the PM role is, it's important.
Yeah, I think it's going to stay there in some shape or form. I see it getting more and more agile. I like Lisa's point too there about the improved and the much more important role is product management for controlling the overall development of a product.
I think it depends, because sometimes the company has like different styles, like different characteristics for different projects. So for example, if the company has like software projects and infrastructure projects, is not like a large company, sometimes the hardware, projects, they are waterfall, because you need to buy the equipment and you need to install it and you need to test it and then it's done. So it's more waterfall than like a software project. So if the PMO is holding all the projects and they are providing like strategic reports and things like Alina was saying, I completely agree that they should be there. And they are providing training, they are providing other things as well.
So Denise, I wanted to share some experience. Recently, I did a very technical, project, which was with a very big company, and it was just setting the new infrastructure. And initially, it was going to be a project, but again, then what we saw was we brought in Agile, and it worked. It worked, and the project got delivered earlier than what was expected. And again, it was a huge collaboration, a big team, but again, it worked. So if you see, that's where I think so.
It depends on the size and the characteristics of the project. This is what I mean. If like it's a big project with, a lot of delivering and, like a budget that's very big, it makes sense to maybe be a little bit agile. But if it's more like simple, sometimes it's not.
Yeah, I think that there is a transition happening there, guys. I think let's agree on that, right? In terms of hardware implementations, right? That there is they are becoming more agile in their nature. Certainly, what I'm seeing, and I'm reminded of there's a great book out there called The Lean Machine, which is written by Dan Oosterwal. And in it, he talks about, he's the guy who went in as CEO of Harley Davidson to transform it. And they're all hardware projects. They're building bikes. But what they found was there was a lot of them were failing. A lot of these projects were failing. And the strange thing was that they found was that the one common denominator was purchase orders, where they found that where purchase orders was a big concentration of purchase orders at the start of a project, and a big concentration of purchase order at the end, that tended to be a failed project. But where they saw purchase orders being hitting on a phased incremental approach throughout the project, they tended to succeed. So I think we're going to see more of that happening on the hardware side too, Denise.
Yeah, no, I agree with that. And also it depends on the company, right? If the company is, because usually the IT is more agile, and if the other areas are not that agile and like you need an improvement for the project and you need to open like this big PO, and it's harder. So it depends on the company. So we are talking about maybe having some hybrids as well.
I think it's a key point that if you're going to move to Agile, your contracts have to also reflect that.
Oh yeah, there's a whole study developing on that too around Agile contract. There's a lot of material starting to come out about that now as well.
Procurement will be a nightmare in that space. That's another.
It's a nightmare anyway, John. I wouldn't worry about it.
We're way over time, even with Agile. Now, I was just thinking to myself, I knew I wasn't going to get a word in this evening with Agile, but that's okay. I knew that. Now, just before we conclude, I'm going to ask the panel to step to the dark side and tell us where Agile should not be used and where it does not work. Your final comment, please. Anybody? Are you fanatics or are you balanced? That's what I'm wondering.
Well, we're probably biased because we think it can work anywhere.
Well, I would come back to the question that was earlier that we had earlier on. You have a company who, perhaps are in a very well established, very stable. They don't need to move online. They don't need to make massive technical changes. It's extremely well known. If there was ever a remote possibility that a company should not go to Agile, and I'm saying remote, if you have a traditional project process in place and it's working, and like we do know, like Lisa said, the one thing that's certain is that things will change. But if we're fairly certain, we can see we've our good planning done. Don't change a process if it's working. Like if it's working, most of the times you will find old waterfall processes don't work. They're not working now. They're not meeting customers' needs, and therefore, like, companies can't deliver to meet customers' needs, so they are becoming redundant. If you're in some kind of strange sort of twilight zone where you can do this and you can deliver for your customers in waterfall, stay in waterfall.
Okay. Anybody else?
You're a rare beast.
Yeah, very rare.
I think-
Unless you're spotted
think-
like a unicorn.
I think if you have a project which doesn't support an incremental delivery, where you really do have to finish the whole thing to see it, it'll be a challenge to do it in an agile approach.
Well, to your point, Roy, we're probably skipping over the fact that a lot of the companies we're talking about are still tied back to legacy systems built in the 60s and 70s, and they're very, very difficult to move off.
Yep.
And are probably tied into some form of traditional project management simply because of that infrastructure.
The nature of the system.
Yeah. Like that, we call them legacy systems, but they're core legacy systems.
If you see, there is a huge cost to them as well.
Yeah.
We saw we saw the Motorola, and at the same time, where it wouldn't work is where people are stubborn at the higher level and not willing to change. And again, yes, it won't work there, but at the same time, at the end of the day, Motorola was a huge, they missed the market.
The history is littered with those kind of things. Kodak invented the first digital camera.
Yeah. Avril, would you like to make a comment on that, or?
Yeah, I guess I'm not as staunch agile as everyone else on the panel.
I think the priest when should you not do prayers?
Yeah. I think whatever works for an organization. I don't think one size fits all. I don't think one type of agile fits all either. So I think you have to work with what works for your own organization and make sure that you can keep continuing to deliver. And if that means taking small pieces of agile and bringing them into your own processes, and that works for you, fine. If it means completely changing, then that works fine as well. If you want to try in small areas, just don't do big bang is my only my only thing. Don't go with just changing tomorrow and that's it.
Lisa, you jump in. Where does it not work? When should you not do it?
I would agree with what Alina said. I think it was Alina who said where senior leadership are not bought in. If they're not bought in, it's going to fail, or it's going to be Wagile, a cross between Wagile and Agile.
God, I knew we'd get there.
But also, just to pick up on something that Avril said, talking about adopting little bits of Agile or else having a whole Agile transformation. We have to remember what the word means. Like, it's about agility, and think about Agile as a small a, not a big capital A. It's not necessarily a thing. It's just a way of tweaking what we're doing to be more productive and deliver faster. That's it, really. In some organizations, it's a massive transformation, but it doesn't have to be. Sometimes, teams and orgs just need a tiny little tweak. That's all.
Yeah, it's a good point.
Okay, Denise, any final comment on that?
Yeah, I think that it depends on the characteristics of the projects and how the company is working at the moment, as most of the people said. So if the company is moving to like a more hybrid in some of cases, and it's the waterfall in some of the cases, and it's more agile in some of the cases, I think that mostly the older companies that they're migrating to agile, they have like the 3 different types, and I think that it's working. The waterfall for some of the projects that they have, they they should keep going. So probably it depends on the company.
Okay. Did I get everyone from the panel get an opportunity to give a final comment?
So,
okay, so I think we will conclude on the understanding that it seems that Agile is a journey as opposed to a process, and it requires a skill set, mindset, and tool set. So without further ado, thank you very much to the panel. Thanks to the audience.
Thanks for the opportunity, John.
Yeah,
Thanks, John.
Thanks, John.
Thank you very much,
Thanks,
everyone.
Thank you.
Great conversation. Thanks,
Thank
everyone.
you, John.
The others
Bye.
I keep in shape, but you guys were a challenge. But thank you very much.
We'll come back anytime, John.
I know
Back
that. Next year or the year after. No, it's delighted. Really enjoyed it. Learned loads. Thank you so much.
Thank you very
Bye,
much.
guys.
Bye.
Thank you
Bye.
all. Thanks.
Bye.